Hi, my name is Mark Bünger. I'm a research director here at Lux Research, and I'm here with Gary Shapiro, who's the CEO of the Consumer Electronics Association, which is the body that puts on the big international electronics trade show in Las Vegas every year that I'm sure you've heard about. So it's a really great privilege to sit here and talk with you, find out about some of the things that you've seen at the leading edge of innovation in electronics, and yeah. So
thanks, Mark. I'm happy to be here.
So we've talked several times already. We talked earlier this morning, so there's a lot of ground we've covered. But I think the most interesting things that we've touched on have been some of these intersections of social issues, technology, and innovation. And you've covered that, from a lot of angles and for a long time. So, what do you see as the next, say, 3 to 5 years? What are some of those issues like privacy and security and innovation that you see happening?
Well, certainly we're going to be dealing with privacy for the next 15 or 20 years as we have for the last 20. Mm-hmm. There'll be a lot of discussion and debate, but ultimately will come down to what consumers want, and they'll choose to buy those services and products and use those apps that they feel most comfortable with from a privacy point of view, because it is important to them. Mm-hmm. But what's really more important is getting to use the apps and products they want, and that's why they click through so quickly on those agreements without reading them. But the companies they trust, if they trust a company, that would be very important. And it's not just the online, it's even the automobile they drive. Will their information be safe? Will they trust the car maker? And the same thing with a lot of other products. And connected to privacy, of course, is information security and the stability in terms of withstanding outside attacks and losing your identity and things like that. That's a concern, and people that come up with solutions like that, as some are. In my view, the solution we're heading towards for some of these things is biometrics. Intel and others are doing a lot of great work to make sure that if you're using your device, you have a family of ways of they authenticate who you are. Other issues which we'll be dealing with, of course, is what rules govern the internet. And that's in broadband, and there's a lot of action in Washington on that. There'll be federal court, Congress, everyone will get involved. But the good thing is the internet's done pretty well without any of that for the last 20 years. And I guess the concern that those don't like the regulation is that you're going to mess it up. And those that do want the regulation are concerned about bad things that could happen because they see a few big bad players that they don't like providing broadband service. To me, the answer is get out there and get as much competition as possible in broadband, and a lot of these issues go away.
Yeah. Well, I want to come back to that issue around competition in broadband, because I think a lot of the principles around, say, net neutrality, which we discussed earlier, they are in, people have certain principles, but they also look at AT&T and Comcast specifically as the customer service levels and things like that people are really frustrated with those two organizations specifically. If you look at their consumer satisfaction ratings, they're among the lowest of any product that people have to deal with. And I think that really affected the debate. So we're ending up with, say, a compromise in the rules that is really because of the role that those two organizations played in consumers' view.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I'm not sure you're wrong, actually, but the truth is, where there is competition for AT&T and Comcast, for example, then they do perform better. Where you have Google Fiber or Verizon Fios in there, boy, everyone steps up their game. And that's why our national strategy and policy should be to promote competition. Indeed, FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler, for the first year of his chairmanship, he said there's only 3 things that are important: competition, competition, and competition. Now, as he shifted to favor the president's proposal on net neutrality, he stopped saying that, because clearly this will have an impact on broadband infrastructure investment and thus on competition. And although they tried to bootstrap it in a written order saying, there'll be more certainty in providing new services, therefore there'll be no, it was not a compelling argument, at least to me. And I'd rather go for competition than regulation any day. And I think, eventually we'll get rid of this mass hysteria about boogeyman that could occur and focus on what it takes to get to broadband competition. And we do have a lot of it now. Thank God for wireless, thank God for Wi-Fi. These are safety valves for the internet, and is allowing competition in services to be created. And the truth is, unless you live in a very, very rural part of America, you have a lot of choice in how you get your service.
Yeah. Well, to go back to what we were saying earlier about security and Internet of Things, and this is an area where I think a lot of people, but also a lot of companies, are really, really uncertain. We just looking at Target, for example, the impact of the security breach on their organization, on their leadership, and everything. If you're a car maker and you've never had an incident like that, that's got to really kind of make you get cold feet about, connecting things to the internet, connecting service stations, connecting consumers with each other. So do you see, again, in your experience, have you seen any people changing plans or rethinking, like, do we really want to connect to this internet thing? Or
well, I have not met anyone who says I'm going off the internet, but certainly, the way senior people at Target lost their jobs, the Sony issue, the breach there was certainly, it's sobering, and it does affect things, and it costs customers, it embarrasses you. I mean, any large organization is going to have some emails that people shouldn't have written it or didn't get out there. There's salary information, personal information, lawsuits. It's a bad thing. No one wants to go through it. So I imagine the largest companies are looking at their cybersecurity, looking at getting the top people. Cybersecurity is really, really hot right now. It's a good expertise to have.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, thinking about maybe industrial equipment, like I was just talking with somebody from one of the big oil companies about their cybersecurity initiatives and what they're trying to do to shore up their infrastructure, because a refinery or an oil field, that's a pretty big physical security risk if those things get hacked or somehow compromised. So does that impinge at all on, do you see any relationship with what consumer electronics companies have done that an industrial company could learn from?
Well, honestly, when I was a kid growing up in Long Island, New York, I always felt that we were going to get the nuclear attack, because I heard everyone would say, well, we're likely to have it because we have Grumman there. And then I met people around the country. Everyone thought they were likely to be hit by nuclear attack because they had their reason. And then I remember early in my career, I was dealing with a Consumer Product Safety Commissioner in the early 1980s who was so fearful that the semiconductor chips in a coffee maker would somehow take over the world and start exploding hot coffee. Okay. There's these fears of somebody taking over something out of our control technology are not new. I'm sure they're here with the introduction of the automobile and the airplane. Maybe the stakes are higher because you're talking about nuclear power plants and oil equipment and on all these industrial things. Yeah, there's a lot at stake. But in reality, it was like the Y2K scare that never happened. We listen to people who come up with the most remote fears. We fear flying when car travel is more dangerous, and the reason is because we're not in control when we're flying. We are control a little bit when we're driving, but these things, I don't lose sleep over them. Maybe I should. I try to run our company in a way, well, if all the emails get out, so what? We are what we are. And if you want to actually say something, you probably shouldn't say, why don't you just talk to a person? Why don't you give them a phone call? Why don't you, and that's why there's Snapchats out there, if you want to talk. So, yes, there are industrial things which can be taken over. A few years ago, the power grid was a big issue. The bad guys are going to take over the power grid. We don't hear about that anymore. Because if they have to, there has to be reliable power through the power grids for it to be taken over. So there's always something, is my point. And, every cybersecurity expert will tell you the same thing. They cannot stop attacks. They can only detect them quickly and do something about them when they're coming in. I spoke to a CEO of a major defense company who's saying they took a computer and they put it in an employee's house and hooked up the internet. Within 15 minutes, there were literally hundreds of attacks on it. So that once you hook up to the internet, you will be under attack and probed and things like that. So just don't put stuff on there you won't be able to see.
Would it be fair to say that the takeaway is focus on it, but don't let it stop you. Don't let that get in your way. You need to have good security, but you can't just, not participate.
Well, the way I've trained my kids, and we talk about employees and I have a book about it, is be a ninja. Being a ninja means you prepare, you plan, you focus, and then when you hit the reality of something happening, you have to be really flexible and adjust because you can't plan for everything. So you do what you can, you have a great team of people in place, you get diversity, you get different opinions, and you go forward from there. But you have to solve big problems, and you have to solve them quickly, and you have to solve them with tools that aren't even invented yet. So you do what you can, and you sleep well at night not trying to worry about it.
So speaking of big opportunities and big problems to solve, are there any things that you see that are really poised to be addressed by technologies you've seen, or companies, or maybe even a business model?
I think we're ready to address some of the biggest problems in the world in healthcare, in water, clean water, in agriculture production, and hunger, simply because we have these low-cost MEMS, microelectromechanical systems, all tiny little things on a chip that cost literally pennies per unit. And you get those sensing devices out there, and you can find out all sorts of information. You get algorithms, you process it, you have entrepreneurs figuring out how to do it, and you'll solve major problems. And I think that's where our future and our hope lay. So, if diabetics can figure out that their blood sugar is low without having to take a blood sample because they have a sensing device in their skin which measures blood viscosity, that's a big deal. And that's just one example of probably tens of thousands that are going to come out there with technologies, with ways of assessing without getting doctors directly involved at every minute, saving societal time in so many different ways, and increasing the use of our natural resources.
Yeah. So do you, I know you focus on the United States, but you've also been expanding internationally, so the international CES. Are there new pockets of innovation, like Finland was really doing a lot of stuff for a long time, and Sweden's been really strong, and Singapore? Are there new places that, sort of the up-and-coming places people haven't heard about yet?
Well, certainly the two best countries for innovation are unquestionably the United States and Israel. They both share a huge immigrant population, a willingness to fail and not be considered a bad failure in life just because you've tried a business and failed. I mean, Israel has the benefit, I guess, of having mandatory military, producing some pretty mature young people. And also, if you're surrounded by people who want to kill you, taking a risk in business isn't the biggest deal. But it's cultural, too. It's the diverse culture, encouraging, pushing back, and pushing the envelope. We're an immigrant culture here. We're genetically from people who wanted a better life. And that's important. I think the most homogeneous countries are the ones most at risk. Some of the Asian countries are more they're more copiers, frankly. And look, we have over 200,000 students from China in the United States. Some of them learning hardcore STEM subjects, but increasingly at a younger age, simply because they want to figure out how we create and innovate. But one country that I used to knock a lot, because they have really bad laws and high taxes, but I think is going in the right direction now, is France. They're really focused on innovation. I mean, the word entrepreneur comes from France. But so does the word bureaucrat. And there's a tension there they're still dealing with. But they have hundreds of startups, and they're figuring it out. But we haven't had a lot of innovation from Europe, honestly. And if you look at in the content, in technology, in the internet, the U.S. is clearly the world leader. And I think we will be for some time unless we don't screw it up. Our immigration laws seriously need changing quickly, because we get the best and the brightest in the world, we train them and we kick them out. And we also have to deal with our legal system, our patent lawsuits, things like that. But other countries have figured out what we're doing, and they're trying to emulate us. I go around the world, every country wants to figure out how to be like Silicon Valley. The good news for us is they can't be. And the good news for us in the United States is it's not just about Silicon Valley. There are pockets of innovation all around the United States, whether it's in Austin or Boston, North Carolina, obviously Seattle. There's so many different places. So even in the flyover area of the Midwest, I've seen some great things. A lot of startups. We have a startup culture in the U.S., and it's a great thing.
Yeah. Speaking of startup culture and innovation and kind of the ground up aspects of how we do things here, I'm really interested in the maker movement and how these kind of hobbyist tinkerers are becoming more and more, startups and maybe even small, medium-sized businesses. And you probably know the last year there's been a lot of focus even at the White House about turning the maker movement into the next wave of manufacturing. So do you have any sense of, do you think these kind of crazy inventor people, can they make it big? Is that going to be a source of broader innovation for the U.S., or is that just going to remain their private hobby?
Well, I wouldn't say they're kind of crazy people, because I think they're innovative people, and they're passionate, which is really important. Success in life and in business. And the maker movement is definitely an important factor, which could produce a lot of things. So is crowdsourcing of funds, and so is actually crowdsourcing of even getting the commitments on various websites so people buy your initial products. We're reaching an age where you could come up with a great idea and outsource the making of it and really tap others' expertise, which is really difficult. The truth is there's a lot of good ideas, but get something made which is physical is difficult. In addition to the maker movement, obviously 3D printing is related to that, and 3D printing, to the extent you can make the products in your home and make things originally relatively quickly, that's a big deal. But the biggest thing I'll come back to is the source of the sensing products themselves, which convey the information, and even the related batteries is coming down, the power sources is coming down so quickly that you can do a lot of things quickly. And what we're also seeing is as we did when the internet itself was first invented and people were inventing websites, then blogs, and et cetera, is even to create apps or to do things like that is becoming a template that's relatively inexpensive, easy to do, and you could create an app now in 5 minutes based on using a template.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so Arduino is the web page of the hardware, the IoT. So
Yeah, I mean, the Internet of Things will, of course, change things. I think we're all not clear as to how, because there's so many different ways it can go, and there'll be things we don't expect that'll come out of it. Obviously, harvesting data and figuring out, dealing with the privacy issues and figure out what's important are going to be real critical skills.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you in the future.
Well, thanks for having me, and come to International CES.
Yes, I certainly hope to do that.